And hello, everybody, and welcome to Magical Journey Podcast. I am your host, Daniel Ian Cahoon. I need to get that middle name back in there again. Uh, have you heard about a place called Skinwalker Ranch? Well, you know what? We're not going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about something more localized for me I personally, after reading what I've read about it, find it to be even more gripping than Skinwalker, personally. That's my personal opinion. You guys who have followed me for a while already know what tonight's show is about because I've been talking it up all week long. But before we get to that, I want to tell you guys I got my cup ready tonight from Mystical Mountain Creation. Jenny, thank you again. It's ready to go, ready to keep me hydrated. And also, if you did not see Tom's show tonight, The Eye of Jupiter, please go back and check the episode of it coming up. Anna, thank you for coming in tonight. I kind of knew you were going to show up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you tonight, if you are a reader of the paranormal, you are going to want to catch this book in particular. This is the first one, but the second one just came out. And I'm not even going to spoil anything with this because I want my guest to talk up his work as well. But I want to welcome to the stage Trey Hudson. Oh, hey, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. Thanks for having me this evening. I hope everybody's doing great out there. It's kind of a steamy, damp, wet blanket of a day here in America's Southland, but I hope everybody's doing great.
Definitely. And thank you for showing tonight because I got to tell you, I have been following your work for a bit, but really diving into it recently.
Well, thank you.
And for those that may not know, I can't imagine at this point people not knowing, but for those that may not know, tell us a little bit about you and your books, which explains a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah. The books, both the Meadows Project and Return to the Meadow, are about a mysterious place here in America's Southland. And you made a rather bold comment. When you said it, you think it rivals and is up there with Skinwalker Ranch there in the outside of Vernal, Utah, in the Uinta Basin in Utah. And that sounds kind of like a bold statement. When the subtitle of the first book is The South Skinwalker Ranch. And it was really reassuring when somebody no less than Ryan Skinner, who literally wrote the book on Skinwalker Ranch. That's kind of where I got into reading about Skinwalker Ranch, in conversations with him, where he says that I think the Meadow is actually more active than Skinwalker Ranch. There's more going on there. And so, to hear people like you say that, it just really validates, my past 9 years of work that, myself and my team have been digging into, because we have put a tremendous amount of effort, a lot of research, hours. And I'm not talking about research sitting, in a library or behind a computer, but actually boots on the ground, days and days and days, and, hot weather, cold weather, dry weather, wet weather, gathering this data so we can share this adventure with people. That's really what I do, is I want to share this adventure in this opportunity, in this experience with the whole world. So maybe they can get something out of it. And at least they'll be entertained, and at most they'll be enlightened. But either way, I'll take either one.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I've been at this. Gosh, I was like probably 3 months after my 9th birthday. I had my first real taste of research, really researching um, paranormal events and so forth. I learned how to research before I learned to research, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And because I was an inquisitive child, but uh, I have been part of investigations to Teledyne Brown incident, a lot of things, to be honest with you, and I have never come across anything like this where everything was folding together into one area, uh, in an area that I'm very familiar with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, because a lot of my early experiences took place in the same regional area that you guys are talking about. So tell us, because correct me if I'm wrong, but if I,
Mhm.
because I've been diving this book for a bit now, your first real taste of things peculiar around the Baz, as we call it,
Right.
was around night. It was around 2015, correct?
In 2016,
16.
yeah, 2016 is, and it kind of, it's weird how this all developed, and I go into it in the kind of the first chapter of the book. Is this region, the broader region, is very strange. A lot of high strangeness going on in this region, and then you start narrowing it down. And I was chasing folklore. Like I was telling you before the show, I started off as a ghost guy, which I still thoroughly enjoy traditional paranormal research. But I was researching the folklore of a haunted road, and it was one of those just fantastic stories, where there was a cemetery and a road was built across it, and the vengeful spirits, are ticked off about being, asphalted over. So they'll come out at night and drag their ghostly fingers across the side of your cars, and the locals say, "Don't go down there at night; them haints will get you." And anybody that's been in our rural Appalachia knows that accent. Uh, and so I was really intrigued by that. And you're laughing because you've probably heard the same thing. Yeah, them haints will get you for sure. Uh, and so, we were researching that, and the doggone haunted road turned out to be a freaking bust. Nothing was going on. It was just kind of a cool story because we kind of were thinking it was maybe cryptid related. I had gone out with a well-known cryptid researcher by the name of Bob Wilson, and he had a remarkable event happen back at base camp, which was a really cool UFO sighting. And this orb came up into the sky and moved sideways and then winked out. And so we're like, forget that haunted road nonsense. This is where it's going on. And he also saw lights up on top of the ridge orbs and stuff. So we're like, okay, base camp is kind of where it's rocking and popping. So we'll kind of concentrate there in our future endeavors. So as we did a little bit more research, we discovered about half a mile from base camp, and it's one of those places you have to literally backpack into the meadow. You can't drive to it, so you have to lug all your gear out there. And base camp is so remote; there's not even a cell signal. It's like really, really, really deep in the middle of nowhere. We found a field, a big open meadow. It's just beautiful. Just imagine, a meadow, a mountainous meadow here in America's Southland. Just gorgeous, and about 8 acres, 8 to 10 acres. And we thought this would be a really cool place to research, not because we necessarily thought anything was going on there, but logistically it made a lot of sense. Number one, there are a lot of cryptid reports in this region. So this big open area made a natural track trap. Anything moving across it would leave tracks that we could literally get down and track, maybe do castings and stuff like that. So that's number one. Number two is being big and open. We could put teams out on the periphery of this, LPOP teams, listening post, observation post teams with night vision and thermals, and they could see anything moving across the big open area at night. Number three is there was a ridge to the south of it that we could put teams up on that could look down or force and drive things out in the open so it could be captured on video or thermal. And last but not least, number four is it had a wide open expanse of skies. This area also had a lot of reports of UFO activity in both MUFON and the National UFO Reporting Center. So logistically, it seemed like a really good place to set up our research efforts. And we were not prepared for what happened. It is it just literally is just off the leash as far as high strangeness.
Mhm.
And so we've been, researching it, very heavily since 2016, July of 2016, all the way up until the present. I'm trying to plan our next expedition out there a little bit later on in the fall.
Uh, for the record, can you tell us just a little bit about your background and where you kind of come in onto this at?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I was a child of the 70s. I was born in 1964. And, when I lived in Atlanta with my parents in the 70s, there were a lot of really cool TV shows.
Mhm.
One of my favorite I just loved watching was In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. To give you an idea of how much of a geek I am, I've got the entire original series on DVD. Just to raise the geekiness higher, there's another wonderful show called Kolchak the Night Stalker, which I believe was on NBC.
Yeah.
Had wonderful Gary McGavin starred as Carl Kolchak. And I have that entire series on DVD. And there was also a wonderful CBS series called Project UFO, which was kind of a real fictionalized version of Project Blue Book, which surprisingly enough, once again, I have the entire collection on DVD. So I'm that guy, So here I am watching these shows. And then there were like documentaries that came out in the 70s
Mhm.
that were like pseudo documentaries. One of my favorite I remember watching in the theater was Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot. And it was kind of a scripted,
Mhm.
fake kind of documentary about an expedition up into Canada to find Sasquatch. So I loved it. I was like a little maladaptive sponge, absorbing all this stuff. To give you an idea of just how bad it was, how ate up I was with this stuff, we went on a field trip from Atlanta to Washington, D.C. via bus in the 5th grade. And the teacher said, "Hey, parents, buy your kids, activity books and, stuff to keep them occupied on the drive up there." So all the other little boys had football magazines and wrestling magazines and fishing magazines. I was a little weird kid in the back with Bigfoot and UFO magazines. So, that was me. And so, I came across this, really honestly. And my dad also had a healthy interest in it. And he bought a book called Gods of Atlantis by
Mhm.
Rod Steiger, which I actually have an autographed copy of that. And, after he got done reading the book, I read it and I'm like, this is just, how can somebody just not be, just amazed by this stuff? So fast forward, I go to university and I'm proudly wearing my shirt here, the University of West Georgia. And they have a psychology department that it focuses on transpersonal and humanistic psychology. And as it would have it, one of their faculty members was Dr. William Roll, the famous parapsychologist. And I studied under Dr. Roll and others. So,
Wow.
I've got, some street creds, when it comes to this stuff. So, I actually, knew Dr. Roll. And then we had another guy that would come and meet with us. And have you ever heard of the book Life After Life by
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Dr. Not Monroe. My mind just went completely blank. That's what happens when you turn 60.
Yeah. Tell me
Raymond,
about it.
Dr. Raymond Moody. So
Mhm.
Dr. Raymond Moody actually lives just a few miles from me currently, but he would come to West Georgia and he would lecture and he would do like demonstrations of channeling.
Mhm.
So that was a kind of program, higher education that I was immersed in. I eventually became a U.S. Army intelligence officer in the U.S. Army Reserves, and went into the U.S. Army Reserves, got injured, ended my military career, went into federal government, did 34 years with that, and then got involved with the local paranormal group in about 2006, and eventually took the remnants of that group and brought it into a larger group called the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group, which not only looks at ghosts, but looks at the really weird stuff within a lot of really tough, hard people or, in our team. And so we go out and we put ourselves in the midst of this really high, strange stuff. So, basically, you can say I was born to it. I've been interested in this stuff my whole life, and I'm just blessed that I'm still able to research and explore the strange world around us.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. Your background is what really impressed me because, I got to tell you, y'all don't get me confused here because you know how I am about our local guys. I love our local researchers and investigators, but, you know, the media, all the clowns online that want to give people a hard time that believe in the stuff that we really seek to get answers to. They'll look at those guys and they'll go, well, they live in the mountains. What do you expect? But it's really hard for them to point fingers at somebody who has the background you have and go, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not educated because obviously you are. And that's where it becomes really important to have people to validate that others will actually respect, because a lot of times our guys out here risking their life going into the mountains and so forth
Yeah.
don't get that respect.
Yeah, they should. And that you touched on something that I think is really important. And I'll just go ahead and throw this out there. Is anybody that's looking at getting into this business, and I'm talking about seriously getting into this business, I would be absolutely negligent on the border of malfeasance if I didn't explain that there is a real danger to this. There's a real physical danger, there's a real psychological danger, and there's a real spiritual danger. So, before you get into this, really think about, what you're doing, and are you really prepared for it? Because things can get dangerous really quick.
Mhm.
People die. Okay, I hate to say that, but people die from effects of this stuff, and just make sure it's really something that you're prepared to expose yourself and your family to.
100%. Now, let's get, because I there's so much to cover here. There's no way we're going to be able to cover it tonight, all of it. But that's okay. We have a plan for this later. We've already discussed that, guys, because I know they're already gonna be asking me, is he coming back? Yes, we got this covered. So when you, with all of your background, obviously you saw the meadow
Hmm.
as being the perfect spot to be
Yeah.
able to observe things.
Yeah.
So when you had everything set up, you really were not prepared or even considering the
No,
idea of what you were walking into.
no, no, not at all. I mean, and it started like right at the beginning. And
Mhm. Yeah.
and I'll just run down what happened to us in July of 2016. So, we had, kind of came across this area in January, thought it was kind of cool, and thought, well, let's go back during the summer. So we had a cadre of people come back with us, people I knew from some other research groups, here in the Southeast. And we kind of all coalesced together and came to this area to look at it. In our, I kind of run things, and you can probably tell from reading the book, I kind of run things like a military operation. Not that we're militaristic, it just works. It's a good model to run an operation from. So, we have a tactical commander who's actually in charge in the field. And then we have an operational commander who's in charge of the whole expedition for the entire week or 3 days or however long it is. So our tactical commander goes out comes up with a plan of operation, with a concept of operation. And what we decided that evening is we were going to have multiple teams set around the periphery of the meadow, equipped with a thermal and a night vision.
Mhm.
And we were going to have a single member, Bob in this case. And, Bob was just like a friggin' weird magnet. And so what he was going to do is walk across the top of the ridge solo and see if he could drive anything down to us, and also see if he could observe anything. Now, the foliage was very heavy in July, so the odds of him observing something were pretty remote. But we had a good vantage point down there in the bottom between this ridge and the a large creek. So we got set up. Bob came on the radio, said, "Hey, I forgot something back at base camp. I need to go back and get it." And so, the tactical commander said, "That's fine. We're just going to stay on station here. Go back, get what you need to do. Let us know when you get to the bottom of the trail and start going up the ridge." So we're patiently waiting, and then Bob comes over the radio and he goes, "Hey guys, I'm at the tree across the trail, which is a really well-known landmark for all the people that research this area. And he says, I don't know how I got here. So it's like, okay, first thing I did is our medic, contacted me and said, I think this is medical. So he got on the radio and he said, okay, Bob, how do you feel? Yeah, I feel fine. I just don't remember getting to this landmark. I don't remember the 15-minute walk from base camp to here. And he says, okay, do you have a headache? No, because we're thinking maybe a stroke or something. Okay, did you fall? No. Okay, is your vision, messed up? No, my vision's fine. Repeat Mary Had a Little Lamb to make sure that he, his words weren't slurred. Can you grimace? Do you have, bilateral muscle function on both sides of the face? Yes. So, we all walk around with a thing called a normalcy box. And what we do is when we encounter something weird, we quickly reach into our normal box and we pull out something that kind of fits. And we said, that's what it is, because we get comfort at that. That's how human beings work. And so we reached into our comfort box and said, okay, Bob must have just been so focused on the mission, in our outing here, that he just forgot. Like sometimes you drive up to work and you're like, okay, I don't remember the drive here. So we panned it off as normal. Well, it turns out it was anything but normal. Bob moves up to the top of the ridge, moves across from east to west, drops down into the west end of the meadow, and starts working himself towards one of our teams. Now, this team he's working his way towards is comprised of a gentleman named Daryl and Tim. Daryl has a bachelor's degree in management from Georgia Institute of Technology, a pretty highfalutin school, and also a master's degree in public administration. Career firefighter, has worked in firefighting services. He's out of it now, but management positions and emergency management and all that. Mm-hmm. That's Daryl. Tim was a U.S. Army Ranger in the 75th Ranger Regiment in their reconnaissance company, a Tier 1 special operations guy. Okay. He also has a degree in philosophy and physics from the Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia mm-hmm. Tech. And he currently, at that time, was working on AI to have AI controlled trains, automobiles, things like that. He worked for a big corporation for that. So two very credible people, very credible, educated, down-to-earth guys. So, and there's a reason I'm laying this out, because what I'm getting ready to tell you is a little strange. So they see Bob come down off the ridge. They're watching his headlamps. They bring their thermals up and they see his heat signature. Okay. They can tell it's him, hot against the surrounding ambient temperature. So they drop their night vision or not drop their thermal. And about the time they do that, where he was standing, they see an orb of light, a sphere of plasma. And this sphere moved about 150, 200 meters and then winked out. And the distance and the speed it moved, we calculated at about 23 to 26 miles per hour. It was really moving, faster than a human being can move. They quickly brought their thermal back up and are scanning, and they see a man-shaped heat signature where the light went out, where the sphere of light blinked out. They quickly get on their radio and they say, Bob, are you okay? And they're watching the heat signature through their thermal, and they see the heat signature bring a radio up to its mouth, key it, and at that time, they hear Bob's voice say, yeah, I'm fine. Why? And they stopped. And they thought for a while. They said, Bob, you need to come over to us. So Bob makes his way over to these two gentlemen. They say, Bob, how do you feel? I'm fine. Why? We saw you turn into a ball of light and fly across the meadow. And he says, no, I didn't. I just walked over here. They said, no, you had to experience something. What was it like? I mean, you were moving. So he goes, no, I walked over here because I'm too old to run. I'm not running anywhere, especially over this terrain. And they got into an argument. So when you boil it down, and I remember, right after that happened, getting into arguments with people. But what actually happened is you had two realities existing in the same space at the same time, kind of like the dual slit experiment in quantum theory, where you'll have light acts as a particle and as a wave, but both at the same time until the observer affects the state of matter. So what it looked like is we may have had quantum effects on a macro level, which, you start thinking about that, that's pretty profound. So that was okay. So now we got missing time. We got dude turning into a ball of light, possible dual realities existing at the same time in the same place. And, just when you think it couldn't get any stranger, at 0200 that night back at base camp, one of my team members got up to take care of some biological business that guys have to take care of in the middle of the night. And he sees a white hominid peeking from around a tree watching him. It's the typical Bigfoot tree peeper, kind of thing. And the cool thing is it was white. He said it was a white hominid, and the folklore mentions a white hominid in this area. So it matches up perfectly with folklore. The next morning, Bob comes over to us with his GPS, and Bob, to give you a little bit about Bob's background, he was a retired law enforcement, spent many years in California doing backcountry search and rescue. So the dude always carries a GPS that drops breadcrumbs. So he always knows what his track is during each expedition. And he goes, guys, hey, look at this. My track line last night shows me being on the other side of the creek, and my track lines are about a kilometer in length, and they're all straight lines. So we looked at it and we're like, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense. So he said, okay, when you get home, download the metadata, send it to us. We'll open up our Garmin software, all of us independently, and we'll look at it and see if we can kind of do an analysis and come up with something in a consensus. And as so often happens in these places of high strangeness, the data was erased by the time he got home, completely wiped. But we had multiple witnesses. So we started thinking about it. So you have rugged terrain that you cannot move any real distance in a straight line, either by vehicle or by foot. So if you have terrain that rugged, how can you move in a straight line over it in the air? He had missing time. He had a moment where he didn't appear to be what he usually is. And so to make things even stranger is we put him through hypnotic regression about 2 years ago. And one of the things that we were regressing was that missing time. And the psychotherapist was not able to break through that block. And it's almost like something has completely erased his memory. During under hypnosis, he says, I just do not remember anything until I got to that tree across the trail. And in my second book, I Return to the Meadow, I've got the entire transcript of that hypnoregression session. So, people can go back there and actually read what was going on there. So, this was our first real, foray into the meadow, doing serious research. That sounds like we hit a doggone home run, our first time on bat, our first time being, recruited up to the major leagues. We knocked one out of the park. But it gets even weirder. That for a lot of people, that research weekend would be the apex of their research career. That would be like, okay, that's the Mount Everest. It can't get any stranger than that, but it does.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you say regression, that is a personal thing for me, because so the person who really got me involved in ever learning anything about how to physically investigate anything was a lady named Robin Quell. I don't know if you're familiar with her or not.
Yeah, the name sounds familiar.
Yeah. She was in Atlanta at that point, and she was also loosely connected with William Cooper, who was an author of a couple of very interesting books. So when you talk about the fact that you guys had a situation where a regressionist could not unlock that block,
yeah,
That is so there it tends to be very rare for that to happen, and it's
Yeah.
extreme cases where that happens.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, luckily, we have a psychotherapist and hypnotherapist on staff on our
mhm,
anomalous studies and observation group staff. So, we put several of our team members through regression, and it yielded huge results. Fantastic, earth-shattering results. With our regression session. So it's definitely a tool that if a person can or team can have that in their toolbox, it's well worth using and exploring.
definitely. So let's back up for a moment because this was like at the beginning of everything.
Yeah.
And, obviously, even with the most seasoned people, there's those moments when you look back and you go, gosh, I wish, you know. So during that process, I mean, when I first read that story in the book, I was kind of like, wow, there was that moment where they dropped the equipment from Bob just as this happened. It's like it would have been very, very interesting to have gotten
Yeah.
to something visual.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately that happens. It's happened to us quite a few times. If we're number one, it happens so quick that you can't bring your equipment to bear. I mean, it just
Mhm.
and being in such a remote area, you can't run your equipment all the time, so you'll use up the battery on it
Right.
and not be able to use it the rest of the evening. And then also sometimes the stuff that you're experiencing, it's just so weird
Mhm.
that you're just stunned. You're in awe, and you bringing equipment to bear never really even comes into the equation. And then even worse than that is your normalcy bias. We had a case happen not too long ago in 2023 where we had some kind of, as the phenomena evolves, it's the phenomena we were dealing with in 2016 is very different than the phenomena now. It's become very personal, with us. It's very interactive, the phenomena, whatever it is. And we had some precognitive sort of sensations where one of our team members said that she felt like she was being watched by something slinking and crawling along the ground. Well, the next night is one of my team members, one of my thermal operators, caught on his thermal something slinking and crawling along the ground.
Mhm.
And in his normalcy bias, he reached into his normalcy box and he pulled out the fact that there are bears, cougars, and feral hogs in this area.
Mhm.
And he says, "Oh, well, that must be a bear or a feral hog because we were talking about those today." And then when we were doing our debrief that evening, I said, "Lee, there were 12 people surrounding that meadow on all the compass points, all the cardinal points. What animal is going to move across an open area with that many people around?" And he's like, "Holy crap." I said, "But you
Mhm.
got it on thermal, right? You record it." And he goes, "No, I thought it was a bear. Didn't think it was a big deal."
Mhm.
So, it happens. But the cool thing is we were able to capture one of the slinking rake-like creatures later on last November. We caught one on film, and I have that video.
Mhm.
So, it happens, and you can't beat yourself up. What you have to do is use it as a learning experience and drive on.
Right. Just to reference what you were saying about local folklore too, for those of you who want to research that, it is the North Alabama white thing that we were discussing.
I'm not going to confirm it was a North Alabama white thing because I do not discuss the location of this area in
Mhm.
any shape, size, or form. There are other areas with similar white hominids. So,
Mhm. Well, that's like the whole North Alabama area is
yeah,
full of white thing
yeah,
lore. That's why I'm telling them if they
yeah,
want to research
yeah,
white thing,
yeah.
that's what we want to research. And actually, to be honest with you, I know 2 or 3 people that swear by it. Where is it? Fayetteville, right past Fayetteville, the little town there, swear that they saw a white thing there. So, and it's actually spelled thing, Thang. So that's the lore you want to research
Yeah.
there. Another thing that's native to North Alabama is the oh god, I don't even remember what they call it now, but it slithers on the ground too. I wish I'm so, you know what? I'm 62,
Yeah.
60 years old, so also I like my mind slips all the time. So, but yeah, if you guys do your research, you'll find that all through North Alabama, Southern Tennessee, there's a lot of green eyes is another name for that you'll want to research in those areas. So before we go much farther into the story, I want to ask you something because this has come up and it's an ongoing theme with my show a lot of times. The North Alabama area is in a proximity to something called the 33rd parallel in a way that can be taken as influential to this area. Do you feel like some of what you guys are experiencing could be because of the energy of this area from that?
Well,
From this,
that's a geographical question. I do not talk about geographical locations. I don't talk about latitude or longitude. I will tell people the area is somewhere south of the Mason-Dixon line and east of Arizona. So
the thing that I'm finding about that is that all the way from, where is it? Asheville, North Carolina to the or South Carolina, is Asheville north or south? I always forget. From Asheville all the way down to almost to Mobile, and even farther than that, actually. There seems to be high influence, and a lot of people say that it has something to do with the proximity to this area to the 33rd. So I've always assumed that it expanded out past just, like, a lot of people want to say it's that, but it's not just that. It goes in all the way through the Middle East.
yeah, I will say this. Okay, if everybody's listening, I will tell you the location. Okay. No, it's this. The Southeast is a very, very strange area. You always hear so much about, of course, the Uinta Valley, Skinwalker Ranch, and then, of course, I don't know if you're familiar with the Colorado Ranch, the Clearview Ranch, Katie Page's ranch. Actually, I've been out to the Clearview Ranch with Katie, which was a really neat experience. Skinwalker, Space Wolf Ranch, Blind Frog Ranch, which I've been out to also. Then you go up into the northeast or northwest, up in the Cascades and stuff. You've got all the Bigfoot stuff and Sierra Sounds and all of that. But the South is pretty damn weird too. And it's one thing about our culture here is it's very Scots Irish. A lot of my family came down from Scotland and Northern England into the Carolinas and then worked their way down into Florida. So that culture permeates, this region, and the folklore is so rich here. It's so incredibly rich because you have that very, very dense Celtic folklore, and then you have the Afro-Caribbean folklore coming in from the South, which you have your voodoo and some of the other your other stuff coming in. And so it's just this really rich, homogeneous mixture of folklore. So, it's, I tell people is, you can experience high strangeness and never leave, never go north of the Mason-Dixon line, or much further than, Mississippi or Texas, because it's all right here.
It really is. It really is. and the vast, like all through from, gosh, where is it, up near Maine all the way into probably as far as central Alabama goes. There's just a vast network of caverns and so forth that seem to be almost connected.
It's interesting you brought that up, because I've had many people ask me if I've had a chance to talk to the Newmans, or Newlands rather, from Hellier. And I have not. People are like, well, I'll hook you up with them and all of that, because some of the same synchronistic things that they were experiencing while they were making that documentary, we have here, in our area, and a lot of their stuff is predicated on caverns, underground passageways, and this part of the country, just the South in general, is honeycombed. It's like Swiss cheese. And then there's some speculation that in some way or another they're all connected. You can travel underground from all the way up Pennsylvania, and then all the way to Texas, through the networks.
Exactly. And there have been, I mean, you guys can go back and read tons of theories on the mountains. I've heard everything from, paranormal activity to the cartel has infiltrated the cavern system, which is some people's explanation for missing 411. Yeah. So as we get into your experiences in the first book, you really dove into what it was like in the beginning. Now you've alluded to the fact that things have become, as you said, personal, which I can so relate to this, especially in the areas where we're at, because it does become personal. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, initially what we were experiencing is we were seeing things. We would see something, exterior to us. We would see, we call them fairy lights. They're little tiny pinpricks of light that they look like fireflies, but this is in the wintertime, in the dead of winter. All the fireflies die out, early September, late August. So, you have all these strange lights that we cannot photograph, which is really weird. We've attempted that. I've been able to capture one on film. So that's kind of, what happened before is they were external, and then we had the incident with the portal, the cube. And, we actually, what happened with that is, one of our teams started noticing initially the first time is a box-like structure down in the meadow being observed from top of the ridge. And then it dissipated. And then some entities were seen on thermal. And like I said before, people don't move off of station unless they're given permission. And this man-sized entity, I'm not going to say man-shaped, it's about 6 foot tall, 18 inches wide, heat signature, was tall, short, and then split into two and then disappeared. And it was in about the same place where this first box or cube was seen on our thermals, colder than the surroundings, not warmer, which is interesting. If you look at ghost folklore, rooms get cold when the haints appear. So fast forward, our team, once we got down in the actual meadow, down in the bottom of this little valley, our team started telling us about they were seeing boxes pop up around the meadow. These cubes or boxes. It's interesting because cubes or boxes have a very rich history in UFO lore, alchemy. Biblically, there's something magical about the shape of a cube or a box. And many of these high strangeness sites have encounters with boxes or cubes.
Yes.
So, we were intrigued, and we decided to bring all the groups together into one big super group of about 10 people and start really seeing if we can kind of pinpoint as these boxes would pop up on our thermals. Well, one popped up and had one team watching it as we started vectoring another team into it. And before they got to it, it dissipated, went away. But when our team got to the periphery of this thing, under the remnants of it, they disappeared completely off of thermal. Their heat signatures were gone. This is in the wintertime. There's no foliage, there's no vegetation. We've gone back to that exact same site, tried to recreate it to see if we could obscure the heat signatures of team members, and we cannot replicate it. It was actually featured in August of 2023, or August of 2024, excuse me, on the Discovery Channel. Did a episode on my portal video. And, we couldn't explain it. The interesting thing is when the team went into this, the remnants of this thing is they said it was like walking into a black velvet bag, like you were surrounded by dark blackout curtains, very dark, very still. They couldn't see stars in the sky or anything. Very quiet, colder than the surroundings. And when they went into it, they did not encounter any kind of brambles, bushes, branches. They just walked into this area, spent about 90 seconds in there, did 180 degrees, and came out. Now, when they came out, things that were not there before, i.e. branches and brambles, were coming out. So once again, we have two realities existing in the same place at the same time. Now, the downside to all of this, 4 people went into that area, into that cube. Only 2 of those people are still alive. I'm one of them. So, I'm obviously still alive. But, we had one team member die of a mysterious pulmonary, we think a pulmonary embolism. Fit guy, my age, died in his mid-50s. And then Bob, who had been fighting cancer for years, had it in regression after this experience. His cancer came back with a vengeance and eventually took him a year ago last March. So, now I'm not saying is correlation causality. I'm not saying that, but I think it's very interesting that of the 4 people that went into this thing, 2 are no longer with us. Then you can go back and you can look at some of Gary Nolan's research into health effects of high strangeness and all of that. You can go down that rabbit hole if you want. But, that was probably one of the strangest things was that box or cube. And going back to, the box, the cube was considered a sacred shape in alchemy. It was the manifestation of the prima materia, which is the prime material of all matter is made out of. It's one of the basic shapes of a representative alchemy. And you go back, Carl Jung talked about the cube as being a archetype. You go back further than that, the Kaaba in Mecca, which predates Islam. Right in the corner of the Kaaba is a meteorite held within a special holder behind glass. Something special about that black cube. Go back even further. The Ark of the Covenant was a box shape. The tabernacle it was kept in was roughly a tent shaped like a box. The Sanctum Sanctoriums, or Holy of Holies, in King Solomon's temple that held the Ark of the Covenant was shaped like a box, a cube. Carl Higdon went into a cube. In Brazil, they experienced flying UFOs called chuba-chubas that would shoot beams at people. Those were cubes. In the first book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, Kohler and Knapp talk about cubes, flying Winnebagos seen at Skinwalker Ranch. They've even seen those on the TV show, amber-shaped cubes. So there's something about these boxes of cubes. Now, I know what the answer is? I do not. But there's something. It's an archetype. It's something that really resonates with us on a very primal level. That shape we know is special, and we respond to it.
It is definitely, that is one of the things that caught my eye in the book too, was talking about the cubes. The very first page I read that on, I just kind of went, oh, wow. I gotta tell you, when we talk about Bob, I often wonder, because he was a sensitive, he was that person who, as you said, was a weird magnet. Everything was drawn to him. I almost wonder if the final collapse of his body was not related to how sensitive he really was.
Yeah. It was, we had team members that were so shaken up that night that they took about 3 days to really process it. It was that strange of an evening. And you're talking about being sensitive. Something that we've been doing here probably for about the past 2 years is, I don't know if you're familiar with a device called the God helmet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we have a field deployable God helmet that is self-contained that we can take out as remote as you want. And what we try to do is have 1 or 2 team members go through a God helmet session, specifically 40 hertz stimulation of the left amygdala is, kind of how we end the sessions, which opens up, certain sensitivities. And we have found that if we can take 1 or 2 people on the team and have them go through these sessions, that it primes the pump. We'll have experiences for the whole team. If we basically make a person known to the others that we're receptive to their visitations, their activities, or whatever. So, we try to take disciplines from or take best practices from other disciplines. We've had amazing SD sessions out there in the meadow, where we actually have, it looks like entities are communicating with us. There's some stuff that just recently happened, and I'm not ready to go public with it, but it was so shocking and so amazing that my jaw hit the floor. I mean, it was just something that was earth-shattering and validated our past 9 years of research. So it's evolving. Things that we did not encounter at the beginning are happening now. We've had people actually physically being touched. We have now dream speak, if you will. We have precognitive dreams, and probably one of the best ones, if you want me to talk about the Knox-Magby implant, mind implant that happened with one of our team members. We had done a CE5 session out at the meadow, Stephen Greer CE5 session, and nothing happened. Goose egg, nothing happened. And we were, disappointed. And a lot of our team members are formally trained remote viewers. So we thought, surely we'll get something up. Nothing happened. So one of my team members, who's also a remote viewer, guys by the name of Tony, U.S. Air Force Academy graduate, has a degree in engineering, spent several years in Air Force Special Operations, now is a world-renowned expert in his field, travels all over the world, very solid guy. The next morning, he said, "Hey, Trey, I was asleep and I woke up at 4:30 and I had this term in my mind. It was Knox-Magby. That's how it was, that's how it sounded, Knox-Magby." And I said, "So phonetically it'd be like Noxmagbee?" He said, "Yeah, Knox-Magby. Does that mean anything to you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, it happened again at 6:30. 6:30. I just popped awake and I had that term in my mind." Well, I went back and he said, "Can you look at it? Tell me if it means anything?" I said, "Well, I'll research it and see what I can come up with. No guarantees." So I started delving into it. And the term Nox, N-O-X, turns out is a variation of Nyx. Nyx is the Greek goddess of the night. Nox is the Roman goddess of the night. Of course, the Romans took Greek mythology, changed the name, same people, Zeus, Venus, all of that stuff. And so we had the Roman goddess of the night was the first term. Magby turned out to be a little more difficult. So I started really digging into where that term, came from. And I found in the Old English poem Beowulf, the term Magbe. And what Magbe means is kindred or children. So if you look at the history of Britain, is when Old English was spoken, the Romans left Britain in about 80, I think 400 or 500. So it is reasonable that the term Knox and Magby or Magba would be contemporaneous, that the speakers of Old English would be familiar with some of the Roman mythology. So you put these things together. So you have children of the night goddess. Remember, we were doing a CE5 protocol that night before. So what do we have that are small like children, with big heads like children, that come into people's bedrooms at night? I'll give you a hint. One of them is on the cover of Whitley Strieber's book, Communion. the grays. So the thing about the meadow is when you think you kind of have it pegged, you think you kind of have it figured out, it comes at you from left field and teaches you something very, very new. And so that's how these things are becoming more personal. We're, like I said, we're having like precognition now, and people being physically touched. And so it's it's very personal. And I can go into I kind of hate to say this because this is really out there, but we had a team member having some strange dreams and recollections of things at night, and under hypnotic regression, it appears they were visitation by the children of the night goddess. It turns out that they look like something like you would read in one of Bud Hopkins or John Mack's books, like an abduction.
Oh, so
Now, that's a lot to take in, I know.
well, no, I was just thinking you're talking like this is unusual. I'm starting to worry a little bit because it sounds like everyday stuff for me. But well, because here's the thing: remember where I grew up at? Well, I told you where I grew up at.
Yeah.
So high strangeness, and where I live at now, I'm literally poised between the land between the lakes and like an hour from the Cumberland Ridge.
Yep.
Like right out by the East Tennessee mountains, all that. So, and I work out that way. I spend 6 months out of the year out there in the mountain areas. So when you say this, I understand most people don't experience these things like that, but it's to me, that's normal. Does that make sense?
Oh no, it makes absolutely perfect sense. It's really funny because I have guest researchers come out to the meadow, and they'll say, what are we most likely going to experience? And I said, well, the most common things, and I say this like this is every day. Well, shadow people and disembodied voices and orbs, it happens all the time. Not a big deal. But then I hear what I'm saying, and I'm like, wait, did I just say that shadow people and disembodied voices and orbs are not a big? That's a very big deal. That's so outside of most people's wheelhouse that they can't even comprehend it. Then you start overlaying all the other high strangeness. And you mentioned the East Tennessee, mountains, and it made me think about Smoky Mountain National Park. Okay, there's a lot of weird crap in the Smoky Mountain National Park. In my second book, I actually do an interview with one of my team members that had some very, very, very bad health effects after visiting an area of high strangeness in the Smoky Mountain National Park. But it's interesting because it made me think of David Paulides, and then of course the missing 401 stuff. Well, here in the meadow, I had an experience, and I'm going to take a peek at my notes. Just in January of 2020, we decided we were going to go out in January of 2020. Wasn't a lot of people there. It was kind of a sparse, because most of the team members work. We didn't have a lot of folks show up. But my research partner, Kristen, she and I decided we were going to go out to the meadow, and we were going to take baselines. And so what we did is we had the latitude and longitude of all these areas where the high strangeness is happening, where we saw the two entities that, the one that split into two, where the box first occurred. And so we were going to go to all these areas using our GPSs, and we're going to take EMF baselines, radiation baselines, and situational experiential baselines. And so we did that. And then we decided we were going to cross this large creek or small river, which is to the north of the meadow, to kind of get an idea of what was on the other side. So, we roll our trousers up, hang our boots around our neck, and we slosh across there. And we're in radio contact with each other. And we can, kind of yell to each other, but it gets kind of thick as you're going through there because you have like a lot of dead reeds and bamboo and stuff. So I slosh through there, and I get to the other side, and I get up on the bank, and I see a log. I put my boots back on, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, well, this is really cool. This is another huge field on the other side of this creek. We can actually run concurrent investigations on both sides of this creek. So I was really excited about it because opportunities were, really, really vast. So, I could hear Kristen kind of, splashing around, say, "Hey, Kristen, wait until you get over here. You're not going to believe it. This is a really cool, huge field. We can do like multiple investigations." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "No, this is really cool. I can't wait until you see it." And she goes, "Just stay there. I'll be right there." So she works her way over and I see her, come out from around the creek, and she comes up and puts her boots on and she goes, "Trey, what in the heck are you talking about?" I said, "Look at this. Isn't this neat?" She goes, "You're in the meadow." I said, "No, I'm not." Now, this is somewhere I've been like probably 50 times prior to this. A little bit of my background: Army Eagle Scout, earned the 50 miler award 3 times in scouting, Army intelligence officer. I've hunted big game, in North America, hunted big game in Africa, backpacked all over North America. I'm pretty confident and competent in the woods. I'm not rattled, being out in the woods. And she goes, "This is where you started from. This is literally the place where you stepped into the water." And I'm like, "No, it's not." And as she was explaining it to me, and this is going to sound weird and this is very hard to articulate, but as she was talking to me, it's almost like the environment changed back to the meadow.
Mhm.
And I was just really confused. And so she gets on the radio's back to base camp. She says, "Hey, Trey's having some sort of problem here. We need someone to come out here." And she has her background. She's a ER nurse, or, we need to come back to base camp. And they said, "Okay, we're on our way." And I just got on the radio and I said, "Okay, guys, I'm taking over operational control. Okay. Leave me alone for 10 minutes. Okay. I'm going to drink some water. I'm not having a heart attack. Just let me get my bearings about me, and then we'll discuss this." And so after about 10 minutes, we, got our bearings. I got my bearings back and kind of like it literally turned back into the meadow. That's hard to explain, but it like literally became the place I was used to. And what became really weird about it is while we were doing that, we were running, like I said, our Geiger counters. We were doing a baseline study of radiation. At that time, the logging feature on our Geiger counter recorded a 0.33 microsieverts per hour radiation spike, exactly when I became disoriented. So, I start looking at that and put it all together. Is if I hadn't had the protocols in place, after Bob's missing time, nobody goes out by themselves. Everybody has a partner with them. We had radio communications and also had navigational tools to get us back to base camp. If I hadn't had all those things in place, would I have ended up like one of David Paulides' victims in one of his chapters in one of the missing 401 books? Because it was the disorientation was so profound that I literally just would not talk to somebody for about 10 minutes. It was that, that meaningful, the disorientation. So anyway, you were talking about Tennessee, made me think about the Smoky Mountains and relay that interesting meadow story.
Honestly, that's why I say I feel like, and I have not ventured north of Asheville ever, so I don't know about those areas. But at least as far as Asheville, down to I've gone as far back as gosh, I can tell you the town Brilliant, Alabama. And most people are not going to know where that is because it's literally maybe 200 people, if that,
Yeah.
that lives in Brilliant, Alabama. Down as far as there, I've experienced or had the feeling of the energy in those areas are very equal. Now, what I will tell you is that personally, one of the things I know about the vast space of these areas is they're heavy end quartz.
Actually, on the meadow, and when I give my presentation all over the country, is I have a photograph of a fist-sized piece of quartz just laying on top of the ground in the meadow.
Mhm. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like it expands through such a large area, because we know that quartz is a conduit, among
Mhm.
other things.
Sure.
And so my theory is that somewhere along the line, quartz is part of the equation to how this energy keeps moving and fluctuating and even growing in such a vast area. Because a lot of people want to concentrate everything down to it. You can't do that here.
No.
You
But
can't do that here.
and that's something that, we, of course, the meadow has a lot of stuff going on, but there's several research sites that we go to that are, like 2 or 3 miles from the meadow that are extremely active, a lot of stuff going on. And it's really neat because you go to some of these areas, away from the meadow, you have these things going on, and then you start looking back in, like MUFON and other databases, and you'll find out stories of the same thing you experienced at those exact, geographic coordinates,
Mhm.
And it coincides. So, we've got a place where it's been logged almost horizon to horizon. We've seen UFOs there. There's a lake we call Stevens Lake in the book. Had some really cool UFO stuff there. Orbs, flashes of lights in the forest. Uh, so it's a big area, and we try to expand our research footprint out quite a bit, because you're going to miss quite a bit if you just focus in on one place.
Oh, definitely, definitely. That's one of the reasons why. Yeah. So I put my foot in my mouth years ago, and when I left this area at one time, I said, I will never return. Never. You could not nail me to a bus and drive me here. And then, sure enough, 2014 rolls around, and I'm right back here with a vengeance.
Yeah.
And there's no coincidence. Trey, I gotta tell you, I could spend hours on this, and I would like to continue to doing some deep diving with you on not only the meadows, but some just theories in general, ideas and experiences in general on the phenomena that we are talking about. Because
Oh, yeah.
I feel like you're one of the people that will probably be able to uh, comprehend when some of this stuff, some of the stories that I can tell you about things too, because there's some guys are just like, you're kidding me right now. I'm not.
Yeah.
Um,
It's really, there's so many facets to this thing, and I know you're familiar with Alan Greenfield, Secret Ciphers of the UFO Knots.
mhm.
Is you take the term Knox Magby and you put it into the secret cipher of the UFO Knots, and there's some interesting stuff that comes out of that. So, but that's a whole other show.
Right, right. And that's the thing of it. It's like this is. I don't think the average person understands how deep this hole goes
Yeah.
and where it goes. Before we do close out, I do want to say something though, that when you were talking about going into the portal
Hmm.
and the verbiage, the way the descriptions that was given of that, are you familiar with people who study the Kabbalah and their meditation?
Hmm.
Does it not sound very similar to the idea of when God went inside itself, or God went inside himself to create? He had to create the void of
Well, absolutely, and that's you just touched on something. Is this is basically a dimensional Yeah, I'm not going to call it portal is just a term we use at the label, but it's a place where the dimensions are not as separate as maybe they are at other times, and that's why thoughts and energies are able to transfer, through the Estes method and Knox-Magby and all of that stuff. And John Keel had a term he used. He called them ultra terrestrials. And in my first book, I coined the phrase paradimensionals. And this is an area that is just absolutely crawling with paradimensionals. And you start talking about, God, creation of the universe, and the world was without form and void, the creation of the world, is you're actually talking about dimensional physics. And then things also down at the quantum level and also in the macro level. So yeah, it's very insightful that you mentioned the Kabbalah, because you start looking at some of these ancient mystery traditions, and there's truths there. It's not a coincidence that in the New Testament, the last book, the book of Revelation, talks about the New Jerusalem coming down to earth. Mm-hmm. And how is the New Jerusalem described? As a perfect cube. And here we are again with the boxes and cubes.
Yes, exactly. I just love talking to you because for once I feel like I'm in my own element. So that's important. Thank you for joining us tonight for this. And we will discuss further conversations coming up.
Sure.
For sure. If you'll hold for just a moment while I close this out in the back, I will touch base with you in just a moment.
Sure.
All right. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow. All right, guys. So a rare moment where you probably see me at my most comfortable ever in a conversation with somebody, probably. If you got to this part, if you followed us all the way through tonight, I want you to do me a favor. Tell me what you think about what you believe about the concept of interdimensional reality, about what we've discussed tonight, especially in this last few moments. I'm very curious about your experiences, your thoughts, your ideas related to this. Also, please do not forget to like, share, and of course, if you just want to comment about how much you like the show, I appreciate that too. Thank you guys for joining me tonight, and may your journey always be magical.
I've waited for so long to see when you come back to me. Through the wars and battles that were lost, we're born again, it's you and me. The rest is history. Past lives. Past lives. Did we dance together on different floors in 1500 or 1504? We must have been lovers. We must have been something in our past life.